You want to talk about drugs.
Yes, yes. This is a heavier topic. So recently, this happened in Bronx, New York. A 1-year-old boy, his name's Nicholas Dominici.
Mhm.
He actually passed away, and 3 other children were hospitalized after an opioid exposure. And this happened at a daycare center.
Mm.
So some days after that, the police discovered a trapdoor under the play area of the children that was concealing fentanyl and other drugs. The owner of the daycare center and her tenant were charged with murder, actually, in the little boy's death. They are facing federal charges. And if you don't know, New York is actually one of the few states that have drug consumption sites to try and limit the street action.
Mm-hmm.
So the area this young boy died in, the Bronx, has on that same street has a drug consumption site there. And people say that the area is riddled with needles. Users are laid out on the ground, and seeing graphic things is not uncommon. But my question to you guys is, do supervised drug consumption sites in New York City make the city safer or contribute to this dire drug issue?
Now, I want to hear from Rob B first, simply because I know this was a topic that he had brought to us before. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, safe consumption sites and this tragedy at the daycare are two completely unrelated things.
Are they completely unrelated?
Yeah, they are, because, well, the safe consumption site isn't buying their, I guess, yeah. I mean, what it does, it provides an avenue for people to bring their drugs to the safe injection site where they can be tested. They can test them for purity, for fentanyl. So
Give them
I guess
information.
it does make sense
it's creating
to have
a neighborhood. It's creating a neighborhood of potential, drug addicts and
it's like a drugs town,
drug zone, not a drug-free zone, but a drug zone.
Drug zone, yeah.
Drug safe zone.
Sure.
Well, I mean, it's a safe injection zone, and it gives them the ability to test their stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's multifaceted. It's not just going to be the injection site alone that's going to make things safer. So, has it contributed to what's happening in the neighborhood? Very possibly. Has it made it attractive for people to distribute their product in that general vicinity? Well, there's obviously a market that's coming through there. And accessibility, right. I mean, location,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in sales, right? I mean, where do you go if you want to score drugs? You go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. It's simple as that. There's always going to be somebody looking to prey on it. It's
really,
unfortunately. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely an axiom in those circles. If a lot of people stay away from NA for that reason, because there are moles planted looking to sell you something, to lure you back, to see if you're going to have that moment of weakness, because they recognize that these are people who are struggling. But I guess it really does make sense that the drugs are there. But it's awful that it was in a daycare center. And I hope that these people get everything that's coming to them, because it makes no sense to endanger these young children. We've seen what fentanyl exposure can do to that police officer out of the back of the vehicle. Didn't even come into contact with it. He just got a blast of it when they opened the back of the vehicle, and darn near killed him. So, of course, a child that's 3 or less, it's not going to take a whole lot to put him in that state. So the fact that they thought that this was right, so it's just, it says a lot about our society that the daycare operator, the boyfriend, would say, yeah, hey, let's stash it here. No one's going to look for it at a daycare.
Of course.
My heart goes out to the family that lost the child, and my heart goes out to all the families whose children were affected by this, because there were a handful of them for sure. This is just, it's gross. It's disgusting. I hope that they throw these people into a deep, deep hole and we never hear or see from them again.
Let me get back. So let me go back to the original question, Gianni. And I see Jacqueline Robinson's online. She says, didn't they try this in The Wire with Amsterdam? What happens to the quality of life for residents in those communities? Yeah, these safe injection
Thank
zones,
you.
I don't know if I'm a fan of them. I mean, I don't know if it's a solution to the problem. The problem being drugs and addiction. Of course, I don't want policing drugs and addiction, but at the same time, we've got to find a solution that works. These safe injection zones are just like I don't know, a band-aid to a bigger problem. You know,
Mhm.
Criminalizing drugs, that didn't work. We tried that in the 80s. So you just say no to
Yeah.
drugs, and then of course they're locking up all the black people. So, you know,
Yeah. And it was
so
just a bunch of senseless, not even crimes really. And they were in jail,
yeah, right.
incarcerated. So they're trying to
Marijuana,
do it
for
a
example.
different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how many black people were, put in jail just for marijuana possession? It was crazy, absolutely
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I know criminalizing it is not necessarily a solution. These safe injection zones don't seem to be a good solution. If we have children or neighborhoods with children being affected by them, or bringing in that element of people, then it's not a good thing. We can't say that that's working either. So
Yeah.
so then what's the solution? I mean, do any of us here have a solution to that?
I think just like many of the big, like, kind of issues, it takes multiple parties, multiple solutions. It's complicated. But I think that the direction that people can kind of go towards curbing this huge drug issue in New York is one, how New York is set up is almost like New York is set up to like Manhattan, and there's boroughs. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like they're forcing people to be in a certain area to kind of indulge in that kind of crime. And I know that you can choose where you want to live and stuff like that, but if you barely make, it's hard to get out of a city like that. It's hard to get out of smaller cities or inner cities. It's hard. But I think that one, it is a political thing. I'm not saying like this big conspiracy, like drug lords are working with the government, but I think that there's a political reason as to why they're keeping those people in that situation. Now, daycare should have never been there. And I'm
Shouldn't
wondering
be
why they
shouldn't
even
be
have
near
the
a
consumption sites. Yeah, at
shouldn't be.
all. At all. Not even on the same street, block, or city. But I understand why they have the consumption sites in those areas because that's where the drug users are. So it makes sense. But there just has to be a better place
Let me
to
let me be clear on one thing.
put
So
them.
is it a safe injection site or is it a safe drug consumption site? Because I think those are two different
Both.
things, right? It is both.
Oh, yeah, because you don't. Some people inject and some people do drugs other ways. I
Okay.
think, from what I
So they're
understand, I
providing
think that's
needles
what
and
they
all that
mean.
stuff, and they
Yeah,
can just go there, do their
Mhm.
drugs, and then and do it legally, well, without being criminalized,
overdosing
and they can be
or
watched.
being criminal. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, that's it. Then they have access to clean needles. They have access to counselors. They have access to testing kits. It makes everything. And if they do have an episode, an overdose, they have access to medical teams on site rather than having to redistribute your medical teams, your paramedics and ambulances on on the fly in the community and expose them to the fentanyl risks. So there are definitely some benefits that go along with the safe injection sites, but as we're discussing here, there's definitely some negative elements that come around that, and how you fix that, I'm really not sure. I don't have
That's
those solutions.
difficult.
I am not.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. I don't write health policy. I don't do health and drug research, so I don't have the
Yeah.
It kind of
solution.
reminds me of those opium rooms where in the old days
Oh, the
where
opium dens.
the opium dens where they just lay
What is
back and they'd be
that?
smoking opium and it was all legal, well, somewhat legal.
What?
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me. That's what I'm thinking about when I
Hippie.
visualize what goes on in there. Of course, I know it's more sterile than
Yeah,
those
Yeah, I'm sure.
movie images
but I
that
mean,
we've seen.
there was a time when manufacturers could put a little pep in your soft
Mm,
drink.
Coca-Cola.
Mm.
That's crazy.
You want some
It is
Coke?
funny how we've come a
Literally.
long way from drugs like cocaine and these opiates being something that were like commonly used and not obviously criminalized to now they're being criminalized and they're being like the people that use them are strung out. Like the people that use them are their lives are completely ruined.
I mean, fentanyl's
for the most
crazy.
part.
I'm not really clear on why fentanyl is being. I know it's highly addictive, and so they're incorporating it in there
Oh no,
to
so
create.
fentanyl
Nobody
is
asked for
being
it.
is no nobody's asking for fentanyl. So this is an additive in the drug supply because it is more addictive. It gives them a bigger rush. Unfortunately, it kills off people, but I suppose when you're
A lot
looking
of
for a
people.
fix, you're not necessarily looking for quality control, you're looking for whatever's available. So
Yeah.
it's really harmful. It's a shame. And at the end of the day, the manufacturers don't care if they're going to kill an addict. They really don't care because they know that they're going to be able to fill those shoes. They know that there's going to be another person who's ready to
Horrible.
purchase that product behind them. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I think it just
It
comes down
says
to. Go ahead, Johnny.
no. I think one of the chief of police was saying that as for arresting low-level street dealers, they're basically asking to build bigger cases, and I think that's kind of
yeah.
BS too. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like, oh, he's. I think that we're past the days of, oh, I have to sell drugs to feed my family. I don't know. I
Oh
Let me
think
no,
that
ask
we're
you, do
we're
you
past
not
think
those
it would
past
be
days.
those
better?
days. No.
Let me ask you, do you think it would be better if we legalize drugs altogether and then, um, maybe had the FDA regulate them or some regulation on, because that way
All
you could
drugs.
be testing drugs regularly, right? Make sure they don't have the
Mhm.
additives like fentanyl and stuff like that. Because they do the same thing for cigarettes, right? Eventually, they'll get to the same thing with marijuana, where they're regulating it and testing it and making sure it's the proper quality. And then you can
Right.
start, if you start doing that, then you can start arresting these dealers that are doing the illegal drugs. And that way you
The
can kind of start to,
bootleggers.
yeah, you can start to eliminate the illegal drugs because you can get legal drugs. What do you think, John?
Mhm.
I think that who does that benefit? The government, because they're going to
Benef-
get rich off of it. I don't.
Benefits
it
I
these
don't think it
neighborhoods, these
it
benefits.
children.
benefits the it benefits the consumer because if they choose to ingest these products and now they are government tested and approved, then fantastic. You know that you're getting a quality product as opposed to getting a street product. I know that when I petitioned to my doctor for my medicinal carrying card prior to the legalization of marijuana in Canada, I advocated for myself, and one of those advocacies was that I had zero quality control over what I was purchasing during my time of replenishment. So I could be
Oh
getting
wow.
skunk weed from behind somebody's house. I could be getting high test weed from BC. I could be getting something that's laced with speed or cocaine. I
Oh
don't
my God.
know. So
Yeah.
I mean, when you
now
start
by
to
having
realize,
something that's government regulated,
Mhm.
that has quality control, I can go to a dispensary and I can purchase with confidence a product that I know has been tested and approved. And I agree with Neo that eventually this is going to go out to other narcotics because the way we've
I
been going
mean,
about
that's
it isn't working. So then what you do is you protect people from themselves.
yeah, and that's really what I was thinking. I was like, it's the same thing with alcohol. They tried to, you know, because
yeah.
alcohol
That's
is not necessarily good for you, right? It's not good
It's a
for you,
known
no,
carcinogen, dude. It's a known addictive.
definitely not.
That's
right? And
Yeah, it's
so
not good for you.
when they tried to regulate it, people wanted to do it anyway because it's addictive, right? And so it makes them feel good and all those great things. So trying to
Right.
battle that is a losing battle. And we've seen it time and
yeah.
time again. War on drugs, losing battle. We lost. All of those battles against addictive chemicals and drugs is a losing battle. So, as Rob B
100.
was saying, people are going to do it. At least we solve a problem, meaning we can kind of eliminate impurities like fentanyl, where they're killing themselves and killing other people like children, right? And so we can kind of control some of that at least, because right now there's no
Yeah.
controls on these illegal drugs. We have no
None.
controls.
None.
But if we put controls in on legal drugs, then it's something to
There's
consider.
something to at least. But the thing is, like,
And
I've noticed with fentanyl, besides like the people catching it and dying from it, it's I mean not catching it, but like finding it. There are a lot of like young teenagers that are dying from it. And I'm like, what drug are
mhm.
they taking that they're getting laced with fentanyl. Yeah, but what
anything that's powdered,
pills?
dude.
Anything powdered, yeah.
If they're crushing Xanax, like anything, because they're buying it from a disreputable source. And a drug manufacturer, to crush a pill or to stamp a pill, to press it and stamp it with the Xanax label, no problem. It's done.
That's sick. That's so sick.
So let's
And they're
see.
so young.
Jacqueline Robinson says, this is why I can't take all the political shrieking about fentanyl allegedly coming across the border. The real issue is supply and demand, and wait for it, demand. Oh, so supply and wait for it, demand. But they won't talk about that. Mike Winter says, if you would read, sir, you would know that this is what Oregon has tried to do.
Oh, what you
Legalize.
just suggested?
Legalize and regulate, yeah.
I didn't know Oregon. I didn't even know they were having issues.
So the question is, are they successful? Are they being successful with it? That I'm not aware of.
That's true. That's something that we could look into. I mean, this is a community thing too, though, because why are people on drugs? Like, I know that's a dumb question to ask, but it's like, it's a deeper rooted thing. It's a deeper rooted thing. Besides, like, oh, all of these legal bans, maybe there's a systemic thing where, yeah, we somehow get them off of drugs and then they do some kind of like healing thing. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with alternatives.
That would work. I mean, but that definitely hasn't worked. I mean, but there does have
why do people do drugs? If only there was just one reason, Johnny. If only there was just one reason why people do drugs.
I know.
I just think we need comprehensive reform.
Trauma is the main reason.
Education, accessible treatment. We got to get people when they're young.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Is this truth? Lies, shenanigans?
This is sad, but it is true.
Truth.
Some sad truth, man.